Okay, I think we are now live. Welcome to everybody that has joined. We've got participants not only from North America, but actually from all over the world. So great to have youth who are thinking about, do you start a company? Do you become an entrepreneur? Or do you kind of get to be entrepreneurial within great employers like RBC? So we've got quite a panel. I know joining these WebExes can sometimes be a bit complicated, so congrats to everyone who's been able to get in. We're gonna take another 2 minutes or so to allow other people to be able to download the app and get on. So if you do want to get a coffee or a drink while we wait, feel free to do so. We'll start in around 1 or 2 minutes. Hopefully our speakers are fully caffeinated and ready for this 55 minutes of panel discussion. How you feeling, panelists?
Excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ready to go.
Okay, great. We'll give it one more minute. I think we all remember our first WebEx or first few WebExes, although even I struggled to get on the WebEx today. So we'll give it another minute and then get into it. For those that have joined, you'll see that we've included a hashtag and social media handles. Feel free to share on LinkedIn and Twitter. All of us are going to be tracking this and resharing some of your thoughts and questions. So take a selfie with the panelists, share your key insights, and we'll be tracking along the way. Okay. So why don't we get started? Just a few kind of acknowledgements as we kick off. First of all, is we're really excited to have an interpreter with us today. You are able to pin the interpreter using those three dots. If you just scroll over and pin it to your screen so that you can have easy visibility. We also want to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wadat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So with that, we'll kick off with some introductions. For those that haven't joined, my name is Dave, and I'm the co-founder of 10,000 Coffees. And in the theme of this entrepreneurial panel, I actually dropped out of school to start my first company. So quickly went from student to entrepreneur and have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to share with everybody on here. For those that are familiar with 10,000 Coffees, knowing that we now work with every major Canadian school and we work with universities and colleges around the world, our main goal is to help scale and create access to informal development, knowing that about 90% of learning happens informally and about 85% of job opportunities happen informally, not on job boards, not through the traditional methods. Most opportunity comes through informal networks. And what 10,000 Coffees does is powers how people access informal experiences. And thanks in part to RBC Future Launch, we provide this technology to all the schools so that students and recent grads can include their interests, things like entrepreneurship potentially, and get matched to alumni and professionals that can help you build your network and share ideas. And today is one of our office hours where we get to bring together incredible thought leaders, pick their brains, bounce around ideas, and understand their journeys through this virtual coffee. We're going to do introductions in just a second. One final housekeeping item is that you can actually submit questions using the chat. So if you look on the bottom right, you'll see a little chat icon. Drop in a question if you'd like us to share that, and we'll jump into some of those audience questions as we go throughout the presentation. So with that, we will do quick intros. Maybe Trang, you can start, then we'll go to Isabel and then to Brien for a quick hello and introduction.
Great, thanks, Dave, and thanks for having me, everyone. Hi, I'm Trang Trinh, and I am one of the founders and the CEO of TREC Brands. We are a cannabis house of brands. Although I'm not here to talk about cannabis today, I am here to talk about your careers and and help everyone in thinking about their path, after graduating or whether you should get a job or start a business. Prior to TREC, I actually spent over 10 years in the corporate world. I started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers, went into industry and worked at Loblaw companies and with Joe Mimran at Joe Fresh. And then I went to Deloitte to do M&A consulting, where I covered the life sciences sector, the retail sector, which then naturally led into the cannabis sector. So I feel I've got some good insights from both worlds, whether you should get a job or start a business. So I'm super excited to talk to everyone about that.
Thanks for joining us. And it'll be such a great, we'll be able to bounce all the questions around a journey from corporate to starting companies and when you make that transition. So thanks for joining. Isabel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. So yeah, my name's Isabel Hazan. I currently work at Leaders Fund, which is a venture capital firm that invests in early stage technology or software companies, mainly across North America. And I graduated from Queen's University last year, actually. I studied applied math and mechanical engineering. So I went into a field that, as you can probably tell, is very different than what I studied. And during university, I spent a lot of my summers interning in both the investing world and in the startup field, and then ended up starting out in venture capital after I graduated. So through those experiences, I learned a lot about entrepreneurship and what might make the most sense to pursue after university. So I'm excited to chat with you guys about that today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And for those that aren't familiar with venture capitalists, Isabel gets to meet lots of entrepreneurs, look at business plans, understand, what makes great teams. And so we'll have lots of questions for Isabel about, what makes a great entrepreneur and how to, what those financing options might be. And next up is Brien.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brien Convery. My preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. My role currently is I am the National Director of Early Talent Communities and Inclusive Recruitment for RBC here in Canada. Prior to that, I'm looking around. I'm probably the oldest guy on this panel and have had a number of years of experience. What I'd like to talk about is an off-roading experience. Been in a number of different companies, organizations, done a ton of different jobs in public and private sector. I too worked for PwC at one point, which is a nice connection there. I consider myself an intrapreneur, and we'll probably get into that a little bit more here as we start to debate entrepreneur versus intrapreneur and some of the different ideas there. But super pumped to be here and excited to talk a little bit more about my journey and some of the things I've done and also hear from my fellow panelists. Thanks, Dave.
Great. So just to break the ice and help everyone get to know our panelists, we're going to start with a bit of a lightning round. And the way that we're going to run this is in the same order of introductions. So Trang to Isabel to Brien and then back. I'm going to lightning round through some questions so that the audience can get to know you. So first is, what's your favorite season?
My favorite season is summer, just because I love the warm weather and the sunshine.
I think my favorite season is spring. I mean, I do get pretty bad allergies, so that's definitely one in the negative column, but I just really like kind of coming out of winter and just seeing everything bloom, and there's just sort of a happiness in the air that I really enjoy.
I have to say spring as well. That's when everything starts to bud and come out, and you just see a whole renew of life after the long winters and as it leads into summer. But it's tough because I kind of like both some spring and summer, to be honest. Not too keen on winter, but I'll deal with it. I've always have. But anyway, spring and summer are probably neck and neck.
Awesome. Who was your first mentor?
I would say that my first mentor was probably my grade 1, grade 2 teacher. I still keep in touch with her. She was someone that just like really took me under her wings, and really showed. I grew up in a pretty poor neighborhood in London, Ontario. I didn't come from a lot, but I felt that my teachers, and starting with my grade 1 teacher, who then also became my grade 2 teacher, just really like showed me the way, and I'm really grateful for her.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would say probably my first mentor, other than my parents, who are obviously huge, was my gymnastics coaches. I used to do competitive gymnastics, so I was seeing my coaches like almost as much, if not more, than my parents. And they instilled like a lot of important lessons in me, like discipline and rigor and just commitment. And like mindset. So I think those were all super important and definitely have like carried through basically everything that I've done in my life since.
And I'm gonna have to go with my mom. My mom, if anyone ever gets the pleasure of meeting her, she is an amazing individual, and a lot of my values and personality and the way I approach life comes from her. She's a connector. She connects people. She's always out there, for the good of others, trying to connect people, and that's something I've learned from her, and that I hold dear to my heart as well. And so I have to say my mom.
Amazing. And last question, what is your favorite go-to coffee or tea or beverage of choice?
That one's a tough one. My favorite go-to coffee is uh, probably like my own Nespresso machine at home. It's just very convenient. I can like wake up and go straight to it. Although I do love meeting people for coffee. So if it was outside of the home, I would say Strange Love on Spadina, which is in the area that I live in, also where my office is as well. I really love their coffee, and the Science is award-winning coffee, which I think alludes to, yeah, they're pretty good. I like it there a lot. And it's dog friendly, and I get to bring Ozzy in there, and they've always got treats for him.
Nice.
That's so precious. Yeah, I also love coffee. I drink coffee every day, even though going into university, I didn't think I would. One of my favorite things to do is like when I go to a new place, I just love exploring the coffee shops there and like trying just kind of any coffee that they have. I'll usually have like an Americano or just drip coffee I'm good with. But I also really enjoy my Nespresso machine. So really any coffee I'm pretty happy with.
So for me, I am not a huge fan of hot drinks, never have been, never will. So I'm an iced coffee kind of guy and iced tea kind of guy. But typically I go for iced coffee, just black, nothing in it, and some ice, and good to go.
Awesome. So great to have you on and get to know you a bit more in those rapid fire questions. So as you know, a lot of the people that are on here are probably students or recent grads or young professionals, and they all have access to 10,000 copies with their schools, so they can get matched for networking to alumni or professionals. But for people who are thinking about starting a business or what entrepreneurship could look like, what is the role that networking and informal mentoring has for all of these participants? Like, what advice would you have for them for how they should think about networking or going for coffees? Maybe we'll start with Brien and then we'll go to Trang.
Sure. Networking is huge. I can't say enough about it. This week, yesterday, actually, we had over 100 newcomers and international students on a chat with my inclusive recruitment team. And this topic came up over and over and again. And I think it's something that's challenging for most because it's not something culturally some people are comfortable with. It's not something we're taught in school. We always hear go network, but it's networking with purpose. And I think that's the starting point. And I think the other thing I would share is the idea yesterday, I was talking about this just yesterday, was the idea of finding a common ground, right? Finding something to talk about, making sure you've connected, you've looked up that person, you've kind of put purpose behind why you're meeting. And I think, you know, it takes practice. It's like a bike. You get on it, you ride it, you fall off. You're gonna have chats that you fall off or walk out and say that was the worst coffee chat I ever tried to do. But that's how you get better, right? And that's how you focus your conversation. So yeah, I think networking is extremely valuable and is the pivotal opportunity to meet people. But think of it as building a relationship first.
Love that.
And just to build off what Brien said, I'm going to go with the theme of riding a bike. Growing up and going through my career, I always thought of networking as trying to compare it to something. And it's like really like working out and going to a workout class or getting yourself to the gym. It's sort of, you know, it's good for you, but sometimes it just feels like a chore, and sometimes you just don't want to do it, or you just feel like, I just don't feel like it today. But you know, once you get yourself there, after you've done it, you feel pretty good. And that's what I've always found with networking events. And it could be sometimes like very intimidating. It could be like it takes a lot of energy out of you. But at the end of it, it feels so great. And to what Brien said, I actually do think that, yeah, it is probably one of the most important things you have to do as an entrepreneur, but also just as a business person. It's great to build those relationships, build the network, because you will end up reaching out to those people one day. And it may not be right now, but it may be later on down the road. Especially as an entrepreneur and starting a company, you're probably thinking about, you know, like raising money, also like building out your business plan. All of these things I didn't do on my own. It took a village to get me to where I am today. And it's really been tapping into my network and all the people that I met along the way, whether it was my old classmates from university, to any of my mentors throughout all the corporate world that I've worked at PwC, at Loblaws, at Deloitte, and then tapping into their network. I'm always learning and always trying to build relationships, and I just think that it is the most important part of being an entrepreneur or a business person.
That's great. And Isabel, you get to meet a lot of entrepreneurs as a VC. You probably have people reaching out to your firm every day, all day long. What makes an entrepreneur good at networking? Like, do you think that that's like a core competency they need to have? What does that look like? And what kind of advice would you share with everybody on this WebEx?
That's a good question. I think, to be honest, so I started during the pandemic. So I joined August of 2020. So I haven't really been to that many like in-person networking opportunities in the context of my work. But what I would say is wrapped into like which entrepreneurs are good at networking are usually just like which entrepreneurs are good at communicating clearly and being concise and direct and just like enjoyable to interact with and personable. And like both Trang and Brien said, that this is like, it just comes from basically repetitions and like putting yourself in conversations with people, not just in the professional context, but also like with friends and family, and just getting used to interacting with people again, which is something I think we're all going to be doing more of in the coming year. But just to also build on kind of like the prior question, I would encourage like all of you guys, because you're students, to really take advantage of the fact that you're students, because everyone wants to help students. And my friends that ended up in kind of like the most impressive or like prestigious positions or whatever you want to call it, even just like most in alignment with what they wanted, are the ones that just like reached out to a bunch of people while they were in university and asked them about their career path and their journey, and just asked to like learn more about someone. And you don't always need to have like a prerogative for why you want to have a conversation with someone, but if you just say like you're a student and you're impressed with where they are in their career and you'd love to learn more about how they got there, and you send like a well-worded email or LinkedIn message, like a lot more people than you think will help you because you're a student. So I would encourage you guys to like just even like start with like kind of one-on-one conversations if you feel overwhelmed by like group networking events.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great parts of like everybody on here. If you haven't, take advantage of the fact that your school has an actual system that will match you with alumni for one-on-one conversations. And you can add interest topics like entrepreneurship. And you can, because you are a part of these schools, you actually get free access to that program. And beyond that, to Isabel's conversation about like writing a well-worded email, also don't forget that it takes a few attempts. A lot of times students, recent grads, and young professionals write one email and they sit around and wait and say, well, I haven't heard back. It takes several attempts. And it's not that they don't want to talk with you, it's just that professionals probably get 50 to 300 emails a day. And so it's important to stay, follow up and reach out on LinkedIn as well, be fairly persistent in that approach. So when I think about my own journey, having dropped out of school to start my first company, now on my second company, having invested in different startups as well, I think about the difference between an entrepreneur and people who are entrepreneurial. And I think those are two very different things that people need to think about, whether there's somebody who's entrepreneurial but not an entrepreneur, or somebody that's truly an entrepreneur that needs to go and build a business. What do you think is the difference between those two things, and how can people think about whether they're one or the other? And Trang, maybe we'll start with you, because you've probably went through different parts of your career path in one of those buckets, and now of course you're an entrepreneur. But talk to us about how you think about that.
Sure. I would say that I know you mentioned like you think they're two pretty different, but I do think there's a lot of very similar qualities. So for example, when I was growing my career and climbing the corporate ladder, I found that within each of the organizations that I worked at, there was always an opportunity to be an entrepreneur or be entrepreneurial within the company, the corporate organization itself. So I'm going to give you an example at Deloitte. I was brought on to help start the M&A integration practice at Deloitte. So although I was within a very big company, I was responsible for helping to grow out the team, for finding the clients, and like building out our business processes and structure and and all of that good stuff. And then I also had a side hustle at Deloitte where I led the Women Initiative Network for all of Deloitte Canada. So I felt like that in itself, I felt that I was an entrepreneur within a big organization. But as I'm talking through this, the one thing that I do think is a big difference, and I'm going to transition to when starting TREC, is that if I failed, I always had a mattress pad to fall on, because Deloitte is such a big company with so many different resources. And if I wasn't sure about something, I can reach out and there was someone there with an answer. Now, fast forward to starting TREC Brands, had to figure out a lot of that stuff on my own, but I was so grateful for the incredible experiences along my career path to be able to start TREC. And I find that you think about other things and different things keep you up at night. But if this doesn't end up working out, there's not that comfort mattress pad to fall on. Like Deloitte isn't going to catch me and say, that's okay, like let's try something else. So the things that keep me up at night now are our investors and like the money that we took on, and like let's make sure that we are giving them a return on investment. How do we create like meaningful revenue that'll translate to EBITDA? And it's just you're always thinking about the company and the people within the company and the business model itself. And not saying that I didn't do that when I was within a, at Deloitte. I was a very hard worker, but it's just, I felt like I was able to shut off at night when I like left the office or finished, like turned off my computer, was able to separate, now like I'm gonna watch a show, go to bed, and then wake up and do it again. So long story short, like I do think that there are very similarities, but then if you put yourself in those two different worlds, one is you're taking a lot more risk being an entrepreneur, but the goal is that it's going to pay forward, like in the future.
And Brien, maybe you could go next, because I know you have so many programs at RBC that help people be intrapreneurs and submit patents. And so what would that look like? Like, can people be entrepreneurs within organizations like RBC, one of the biggest employers in Canada? Like, maybe give us the pitch on that, and how people can look at large organizations to be either entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the thing I'd like to lead with that, it's a mindset. So when you look at, being an entrepreneur or being an intrapreneur or having an entrepreneurial mindset, they all kind of like, as Chooks find out, it's like they kind of overlap. Like they're all kind of somewhat interchangeable. But when you kind of start to break it apart and think about a bigger organization, I've kind of always approached my career from this perspective and always looked to have this mindset, or I've always had this mindset in some way, shape, or form. And it was, how do I match that mindset to an organization that will value it, right? Because sometimes it's hard to be an entrepreneurial mindseted person in a large organization if you're just moving widgets around. So you need to find those opportunities that really you can add value. And what I think about it is, so let's talk about entrepreneurial mindset. So it's really like a certain way of thinking. It's about the way you approach those challenges and also mistakes, and talking about improving your skill set and trying again. There was a great article I read from Forbes, from a gentleman who's the CEO and founder of Yocal, which is a online scheduling and marketing platform. And he advised on 5 things if you're going to have an entrepreneurial mindset. And the first was revisit your vision on a daily basis. So, set aside time. I don't care if it's 5 minutes, bring your vision to the forefront, think about what your vision is. The second thing he said was put yourself in challenging situations. So embrace challenges, seek them out. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. This is how you learn. The third thing he said was read on a daily basis. And I do that every day. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm always reading articles. I'm always looking at what's out there in the market. This is how to become a better version of yourself, right? It means nourishing your brain, reading on a daily basis. And then the fourth thing he shared was approach problems from all sides. So simply put, you really need to think different than the rest of the people in your organization. Think about everyone's position. Think about who's at the table. Think about being in their shoes. And then the last thing he shared was always be in motion, provide value. And so if you are an entrepreneurial mindseted individual, you always want to be, in motion and adding value. So I think of Nike, just do it, but do it and provide value. So I think those are ways that you can actually think about the entrepreneurial mindset. RBC has given me the opportunity to build out a platform to be have autonomy in my role. We do encourage this in different programs and things that we have across the organization. But for me, it's about having that mindset first, then matching that to the companies and organizations that will allow you to exercise those muscles, Dave, so that you can be that person and enable that in an organization that might be as large as an RBC.
That's awesome. And like really quickly, because there's a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, but are people able to be entrepreneurial at an organization like RBC? Like what is that? Like I've heard, is it true that people are submitting patents and actually creating businesses within the organization?
Yeah, 100%. Especially in our student programs. One of our big programs that's out there is our RBC Amplify program, and you can find information about that on any of our websites. But on a regular basis, every summer, students are in our Amplify program, not just in Canada, but around the globe. And I think last summer we had 18 patents come out of the students that were with us. So there, if you seek out those opportunities, and you don't have to be tech, right? I mean, that Amplify program sits in tech, but guess what? They hire business analysts, they hire other types of folks from other programs, because it's an entire team, back to the village concept, right? It takes an entire village to make something happen. So those experiences are looking for the entrepreneurial spirited individual, but not just a tech background. So yeah, so I think there are opportunities out there that there are opportunities out there specifically with us right now. And if that's of interest, that's where you can kind of get your foot in the door. We also have an RBC Ventures group, which is a wing, another branch or another aspect of RBC. And they look for those types of individuals who want to join and look at sort of startup mentalities. And we have a number of jobs posted for that right now. I guess I can do a plug. But that's an opportunity as well for individuals who might want to have that ability to exercise those muscles, but back to TREC's point, like maybe not so sure they can do the sales and the revenues and all that stuff on their own right now. So sometimes that's an option, which is sort of a hybrid in between scenario. So
Yeah, that's
Dave,
thanks for
yeah. Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to quickly add to that, Dave, and I'm like, reminiscing my time at Deloitte, and I think many organizations have these programs where they support entrepreneurs within their organization. For example, there was at Deloitte, they ran a program similar to a Dragon's Den, where you can go pitch your business idea and they would give you the support and resources within the firm to go act on it. And there was a very successful AI venture that spun out of this program. But I've seen other really neat, business ideas and models come to fruition through that as well. So I think whether it's RBC, whether it's Deloitte, PwC, all the big firms and the corporate space generally do have programs that support the entrepreneurial mindset.
That's awesome. So I'm going through just tons of questions coming in. Maybe we'll start with Isabel and then to Trang and then to Brien. What just like best advice? People are going to go start a business. They've made that decision. What do you suggest? What are like the things that they should think of or actually do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I think the number one thing that people miss when they start a business or like don't necessarily read into so much is that they really need to understand and start with the problem before thinking of a solution. So a lot of times people just like have an idea and they think it's a great idea and it makes sense to them and they tell their friends and they're like, yeah, that's a really good idea. But what they might not understand is that a business is only going to be successful if there is a strong need for whatever you're building, if it's a super important problem to whomever your customers are, if you're solving a super important problem, sorry. So before starting a business or incorporating or deciding what your solution is, really getting to know your customers and understanding the problem extremely deeply before you come up with your solution is, I think, one of the most important things you can do to set yourself up for success, because you can sink a lot of resources and time and energy and frustration and money into building something that people don't actually want or need. So yeah, understanding the problem and your customers would be my piece of advice.
Great advice. Trang.
I'm going to build off of that and actually give the story of why I started TREC Brands. So when I was at Deloitte, I got the opportunity to cover a lot of cannabis companies back in 2016, 2017. There was a lot of merger and acquisition activity within the space itself, leading up to legalization, which happened in 2018. So what I saw was a lot of companies were dumping their money and resources into what they called funded capacity. And it was just into facilities to grow the plant itself. But not a lot of people thought through, okay, how do you get this product into the consumer's hand? And if you take it back to basics, and because of my experience working with life sciences companies and retail companies, you need a brand, and you need brands for consumers to resonate with. But everyone was so focused on, buying these massive facilities and growing so much weed as you possibly can. But thinking through how a consumer makes the purchase, no one was focusing on brand building. So our business model is we actually focus on the very far end of the spectrum. Let's understand what brands and would resonate with the end consumer, find out what type of product do they actually want to use, like what are their need states, like why do they want to use this, and then find products to backfill the brands. And now we're in a position where, okay, we've got over 20 products across Canada out in the market. We never owned our supply chain, and now we're looking at vertically integrating backwards a little bit. So we started on the far right end, and the problem that I was trying to solve was that, like, consumers need to, not saying that I want to persuade someone to like go purchase cannabis, but it's sort of, they need a brand to resonate with. Whereas and you can take it to like any type of industry, like if you think about like the tomato plant, like where you make the money or the business model is not fully in being the farmer or growing the tomatoes. It's what you do with the tomatoes. And it's what you put it under. Is it under President's Choice, PC Organics tomatoes? Does it get processed and get put into tomato sauce? So whatever your business model is, you can probably take a step back and think about like what other industries or playbooks that sort of already exist out there, and then bring it back to basics to help you think through your business and build out your business plan to solve the problem that you're putting out there.
And maybe I'll jump in and just kind of, there's another question that came in that's kind of queuing things up. And I think Brien, you've probably hired thousands of people, and you've seen them take all different career paths. But the fear of failure is something that keeps coming up. Should I do it? How do I avoid it? And kind of jumping off the fear of failure, one question that came in is, whether somebody should try to gain experience in their field for a few years and then leave and start a company, or whether somebody should just jump in and start a business. Brien, what do you think? Because I know you've seen a lot of people as well go work in different programs and then go start businesses and then come back to the bank. What's your kind of advice on whether people should just go and do it now? And that might be right for some people, or whether they should go get experience and then consider it later.
Yeah, great question. And I'll use my consulting answer. It depends. Because we used to say that a lot in consulting. And I think the fact of the matter is it really does depend, and there's not one right answer to this pathway, right? No longer is it a linear path from school to work, and no longer is it a linear path from your degree or your major to you studied accounting, therefore you become an accountant. So when I think about this from my own lived experience, I had almost 9 years of industry knowledge in consumer packaged goods, working for the Dannon Company and Colgate-Palmolive as a buyer, literally buying strawberries and sugar and trading milk at 22 years old. And I really feel very blessed that I had that job, because it was an $83 million portfolio. I knew no idea what I was doing, right? I had no idea how to purchase strawberries and sugar and all that. But the point of this story is those 7, 8, 9 years in consumer packaged good, production planning, manufacturing, I did every single job for both those organizations. And that credibility I built in that industry and in those skills were so extremely valuable when I decided to go into consulting for tech, right? And training up the individuals that were implementing these systems. And I immediately walked into a client, and I'll be very transparent and even vulnerable with this statement. And I had, 5 weeks of SAP training in Toronto. I was living in New York, came back and like, okay, you're flying to this client, you're the expert, go. And, I went down there and it was in Savannah, Georgia. It was a lovely location. And really what bought me that credibility was when we started talking and they understood my background. It wasn't just that I was coming in for a technical implementation. It was that I had 7 or actually 9 years of experience in the field that I was consulting on. So I understood the business side of the problems as well as well, kind of the tech. I was about a page ahead of the client, probably in every step of the way. But that's the point, is there isn't really one path, but I felt more confident in that I could lean on that experience to help me go to the next stages. So as this relates to you individually thinking about your values and thinking about what you want to do, and my panelists here as well, we've all had different paths. But if it makes you, I don't want to use the word comfortable because I don't want anyone to be comfortable in their career. You should be challenging yourself. But I'll use it for this example. If it makes more comfortable to work in an organization where you can build that industry knowledge or those skills and then go build your business, it could be an interesting path because you then have a lot of relationships to lean on. But again, there's no time like the present to jump in and start your business. I mean, I don't think, again, you might say I took a bit of a safe path, and I'm still in corporate environments, right? I haven't gone and done my own business, although many people told me I should. I think that's the answer, Dave. Like, it depends. But hopefully just sharing my lived experience helps you kind of think what might work for you. And the biggest thing I'll say is don't listen to the naysayers and to people that tell you, oh, that's not going to work or that's not a good idea. Everyone on this panel is a change agent and a change mindset. And I've had my experiences where I've come to Dave and said, I don't know, I had this idea and nobody's seeing it. And I feel like I'm pushing up all uphill. And he'll tell me, hey, Brien, you're a change agent. And that's why you bring those changes forward. And not everyone's going to love you or your ideas, right? But those are the ones that get implemented. And those are the ones that people get to know about and actually be successful at. So don't listen, to everyone else. Don't compare yourself with anybody else. Just take your own path and journey and then live it. Go for it.
Great. Isabel or Trang, anything to add?
Sure, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think that I really do believe that as much advice that we can all give you and that people will give you, at the end of the day, a lot of like the answers that you guys are looking for when it comes to these questions in general, you will be able to figure out if you actually just listen to your intuition. And I know that's a very confusing piece of advice because sometimes you can be pulled in different directions, like you want to do something that's securing a financial future for yourself or like making a smart kind of future looking decision, but you also have a pull to do something in the moment that feels really urgent and pressing. And in those cases, like it's important to get people's input, but at the end of the day, like if you feel really, really compelled to do something and you start doing something else and it feels really wrong and like you're not in the right place, I really just encourage you guys to like listen to that feeling and try and actually act in alignment with what you want to be doing at a certain point in your life. But I'd also say that, it's easy to think like when you're in university, and I remember thinking this a lot, that you needed to like come out and make the absolute right decision, like right at graduation, you needed to start a business or get into the exact right job that you would want for the rest of your life or whatever it might be. But when you start speaking to people that have had like full careers, you realize that there's so much randomness and like serendipity in people's lives and like career arcs, that if you make like a slightly wrong turn, or like you're in a position you're not perfectly happy with, you're not trapped, and like there's always a way out, and there's always a way to like start your own thing or join a new company or do something you're interested in. And a lot of the opportunities and experiences that you will find yourself in, you'll stumble into and like not have been able to plan for. That's how I got my job. Like I started chatting with the partners at Leaders Fund at a conference, and then it evolved into an interview process, and that's how it happened for me. So but that was also because of the fact that I wasn't pursuing jobs that I knew I didn't want to do because my friends were doing them. A lot of my friends were recruiting for like consulting firms and investment banks and things like that, which is obviously a hard path, but easy in the sense that you're sort of securing a future for yourself that's like very guaranteed, and that people tells you opens a lot of doors. But if you really don't feel pulled to it, like don't just do what your friends are doing because it seems like the right thing, and trust yourself to like also put yourself in the right places and have intuition that's leading you in the right direction. I know it was kind of a bit of a tangent, but
No, that was so good. Thanks for sharing that. Trang, anything from your perspective?
Yeah, I think all like what Isabel and what Brien said really resonate with me. Just, for me, I actually didn't know about the entrepreneurial world. I didn't think I would ever be an entrepreneur. My path was I was going to become a partner at Deloitte, and that was, the path that I was taking. And it wasn't until an old classmate of mine approached me with this idea to do this together, that it really got me thinking, because of the experiences that I've had along the way, can I do this? And I think I was lucky at a point in my career where I could take that leap and be okay. And I think, I don't know, like I'm thinking back, for me, like I don't think I would have been able to start a business right away, right out of university. And that's my own personal journey, because I do leverage so much on everything that I've learned, whether it was getting my CA, being able to like understand financial statements fully, or working at Loblaw and Joe Fresh with Joe Mimran, like, and understanding like being an operator, or being able to see so many different companies at Deloitte when I was doing all the M&A work that I was doing in all the different sectors. That really helped me. I'm taking the best of all of those different jobs to like really truly help build out TREC. So with that said, like my journey, I do feel that I really appreciated the corporate world, and all of the business processes and the guidance and all the people I met along the way to really help me be successful in this business venture that I'm doing right now.
That's great. And something that I think about a lot is you have a business idea. How do you test it? And I remember when I was at University of Waterloo, like you, Trang, I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. It was, and not to date myself, but it wasn't cool to be an entrepreneur either at that point. Nowadays, Mark Zuckerberg kind of paved the path, and everyone wants to, start a business from college potentially. But it was really strange. And I remember when I started a business, my roommate sat me down and was like, "Are you okay? Like actually okay? Because it seems like you might have like kind of lost it." And I couldn't believe that. I was like, I had this idea and I care so much about it, but that's how, to Isabel's point around not doing what your friends might do, like people really don't look at those pathways correctly. Or I think what I would share with all of you is you have to care about the problem a lot, like Isabel shared earlier. You have to be obsessed with it. You have to like the people that you work with. And it's not a glamorous path. It's probably the hardest job in the world. And if I say so myself, I don't know if anybody else agrees with me on the phone, Isabel, from all the entrepreneurs that you work with, or Trang from your world, and Brien, you've seen my life. But you work really, really hard. It's incredibly fulfilling. But I would encourage everybody to think about looking at some of the organizations like RBC who have these innovation programs, because those are also great ways to test it and kind of de-risk some of the elements. A question that I have for the panelists is like, how do we de-risk? Like, how can we maybe try out an idea without maybe losing all of our savings or kind of going right into the ditch? And I'll ask you, I'll answer my own question first, and then I'll pass it around the room. But when I had this first idea, the great thing about being a student or a recent grad is you can probably take an internship or 3 months off, or even if you work somewhere, you can probably talk to your manager to say, I want to take like a sabbatical for 3 months. And depending on the organization, they might let you, or they might let you work, part-time, so that you can take 3 months to work on a personal project, as long as it's, of course, not competitive and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I did. So I took 3 months between semesters, and I set goals and I set success criteria, and I went and tried it. And I worked 70 hours a week, because at the end of that 3 months, if I didn't hit $100,000 of revenue, I was going to shut it down. And I ended up doing it. And it's a longer wind story, but the whole point is like, think about the idea, think about a way that you can test it in 2 or 3 months. But that's one way that you could probably reduce the risk or the fear of failure. For the panelists, I'll kind of open it up to all of you, but any thoughts on how the people on this call can maybe test and learn based on your own experience or the programs that you each have been a part of?
I can start. I think mine was similar to yours, Dave, in the sense that I came from a very supportive background at all the companies I worked with. And I think the most important thing is that you never want to burn bridges. You want to, if you are working in the corporate world first and then looking to start a business, I know that I can reach back to PwC or Lavos or Deloitte and know that I can always go back. And I think like feeling that safety net, but it took a lot of hard work to build that reputation and integrity within those organizations. Now that I've done the entrepreneur path, I don't think I can go back to the corporate world, but I know that there's always a spot for me there. But I honestly am so passionate and love what I'm doing and like paving the way. And I think if you're so passionate about it and you're obsessed over it, it will work out. And the other thing, as you were speaking earlier, Dave, was just around like I think everyone that I've talked to that have like started a business and have been really successful in it, it's more than just solving a problem and starting a business. There's usually like other intrinsic factors of why they're doing this, and it's sort of like asking yourself like the question like why. And for example, like for TREC, like TREC stands for trust, respect, equality, compassion, and it's sort of the values that drive and lead all of my business decisions every single day. But my mission of like why I'm doing this and how we follow through is like we give 10% of our profits back to the community. And for me, it was sort of, I wanted to use the spotlight in cannabis because it's a new industry to Canada and the world to highlight social good. And that was sort of like my why. And I think knowing your purpose and your why, it will be very difficult and hard to fail.
Okay, we probably got time for one more, and then we'll do final remarks. But that was great, Trang. Good advice. Isabel or Brien, any thoughts?
I was just gonna say quickly, and Isabel, if you can you hear me? Make sure I'm not.
We can hear
Okay.
you.
And Isabel, you probably have some good advice too on this. I think the the biggest takeaway, and I haven't owned my own business, so I can't talk from that perspective, but I think how boring life can be if you don't look at being courageous and taking risks. And so from my perspective, those are a part of being entrepreneurial, having an entrepreneurial mindset, and just enjoying the moment. So I just think that, when I always talk about one of the things that moves me or my values, risk taking is, that was one of my concerns coming to a bank, right? I said it out loud, like, I'm not going to take risks with money. I'm going to take risks with people and the way we talk to talent. But, think about having courage, and risk taking to me is something that allows you to pursue your passions. So that would be my advice is, and you, both of my panelists said the same thing, right? It's not your last job, your first job. You have a network to fall back on if you've not burned bridges. So all those things make a difference. And so, yeah, that's again sort of my 2 cents, Dave, for what it's worth.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I think a way to test it too is to go and join an entrepreneurship program, or to join a company and join accelerator programs like RBC Amplify. Deloitte has similar ones. So we're at time. It's hard to believe that an hour can fly like that.
One other quick
First off,
thing. Can I interrupt? Sorry. One other quick thing you made me just think of it is there's also school programs right now in university and college that you can go in and take courseware in entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur. And I know, and Isabel, like maybe that that's an area, like why not take a course outside of your path, or look at that if that's of interest. I'm assuming, I didn't go through it, but I've seen a lot of students come to me with those skills and gone through those programs. So yeah, sorry, Isabel.
Yeah, I did a summer program at Queen's that was like basically 4 months. Then you start your own venture and you get together with other students. So a lot of universities are developing new programming like that, and it's really worthwhile, in my opinion.
Yes, and the pitch for all of that to everyone is, if you go to 10,000coffees.com/schools, of course, most of you are already a part of your 10,000 Coffees school community. And if you search for entrepreneurship, there's many campus linked accelerators or like entrepreneurship programs that are linked to your school. And when you search for entrepreneurship, you'll actually see most of our schools have their entrepreneurial advisors in the program, and you can request and have a coffee with them. So it's a great next step. So thanks so much to our panelists, and congrats on all that you've achieved as entrepreneurs or as people who are so entrepreneurial within your organizations. For next steps, definitely share with our hashtag. We'll be looking out, resharing and looking at all the different things that you've learned. And we'll be continuing to host these sessions from time to time on all different topics. So stay tuned for our next session. Have a great rest of the week. And again, thanks to our panelists. You were amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.